Going to be comparing the Charlotte's Web franchise to the Despicable Me franchise. The reason for that is because in part one of this series, I compared the Charlotte's Web franchise to the Animal Farm franchise, Charlotte's Web 1. I also compared the Despicable Me franchise to the Cars franchise in the first part of the series. Despicable Me won over Cars, so now I'm going to compare Charlotte's Web and Despicable Me. When you look at highest score for each franchise, the original Despicable Me is an 80%, whereas the 2006 live-action version of Charlotte's Web has a 79%. When you look at lowest score, the 1973 animated version of Charlotte's Web is a 76%, whereas the first Minions standalone movie only has a 55%. When you look at average score, Charlotte's Web is an average of 77, Despicable Me is an average of 65. So far, Charlotte's Web has won 2 of the rounds, Despicable Me has won 1 of them. When you look at gap between lowest and highest score, you got, well, gap of only 3% in the case of Charlotte's Web, whereas with Despicable Me, it's a gap of 25%. And in this case, not only has Charlotte's Web won 4 of the rounds so far, 3 of the rounds actually, but I'm also easily going to choose Charlotte's Web over Despicable Me. I think that Despicable Me has not been as consistent. I think the original movie is really good. Can it be a bit juvenile with its humor at times? Sure, but it does a good job of both having funny moments, cute moments with the minions, but also a solid emotional core to the story as well, about this guy Gru, who at first is a supervillain that grows to care about these girls and thus becomes a better person as he ends up being a father to them. That really works well. They have this guy who's despicable, and then he meets these 3 girls, and at first he's just taking advantage of them for his own ends, but then he grows to legitimately care about them, to actually be more selfless. But I think the problem for the Despicable Me franchise is after the first film, Gru's been reformed. He's not despicable anymore. He's not the supervillain anymore. So when you move into the second, third, and fourth film, it just feels like we've lost the initial premise, the initial hook for the franchise. So things just aren't as interesting. Don't get me wrong, I like that in Despicable Me 3 we meet Gru's brother, and thus Gru is tempted back into the life of crime. Okay, we're getting closer anyway to the initial concept for Despicable Me, but still, it's definitely a problem. I haven't actually seen Despicable Me 4. Originally, I was thinking that I might see it, but then I watched reviews about the movie and was like, no, this just isn't good enough for me to want to pay to see it. If I'm going to watch it, I'll just watch it for free at home, because it feels like the movie has nothing to offer other than the jokes, other than cute moments of the minions. All the emotion that was there at first of this franchise is just utterly gone. It just feels like now we're doing a bunch of quick jokes for the TikTok generation. All these little bits that would be great if there's shorts on the Blu-ray or TikToks, something like that. But when you watch a movie and you feel like, okay, it's just subplot on top of subplot, they don't really matter or connect with each other. The main plot just bookends the movie. That's not very interesting. When it comes to Despicable Me 2, sure, I like that Gru meets this lady who ends up being a mother to the girls. Okay, that's heartwarming, but in Despicable Me 2, it feels like the relationship between Gru and the girls is sidelined, because Gru is now meeting this lady and learning about this organization, so we've lost something. I think that the first Minion standalone movie is just a fundamentally flawed movie. The idea here is just bad at its core, because the minions are not meant to be main characters. They're meant to be side characters. They're great when they're sprinkled in a movie, like how if you sprinkle salt or pepper onto your food, it makes your food taste better. But does that mean you eat a spoonful of salt or a spoonful of pepper? No, of course you don't do that, because then it would not taste good at all. It would be way too strong to eat a spoonful of pepper. That's what you have when you do a movie just about the minions. It's too much. Also, the problem is that fundamentally, the minions do not grow or change. They do not speak a language that's discernible to us. They speak gibberish. You can only, make out a few words here and there, but not enough to actually understand what the minions are saying. So it just doesn't work. And I think Minions Rise of Gru is an improvement over the first Minions. Just simply bringing in Gru really helps out a lot, because then you have a character that you can actually connect with, that you're following along on the journey, so you're more invested. And also, I think by bringing Gru in and showing his villain origin story, basically how he became the supervillain, we are getting back to the initial concept for this franchise. We're getting back to that initial starting premise. But overall, I think Despicable Me has not been able to keep the quality up. With Charlotte's Web, I like both versions of this story. They're fairly similar. They're not too different from each other. I have a good time with both of them. And this is a story that I'm nostalgic for, because back when I was in school, I read Charlotte's Web. I think it probably was for one of my classes. I don't remember which one, but I remember reading Charlotte's Web, like how I read Animal Farm back during those times. They'll wrap things up for this video.